Welcome to our UNLV Scholarship and Practice web series here. Thank you so much for joining us this evening to talk about research-based approaches to school improvement efforts. Here's kind of the plan for today. We're going to do some brief introductions, and then we're going to talk a little bit about school improvement plans and a study that we did together, Dr. Roberts and I, and then at the very end of this study, explanation of the study, we have our special guest administrators who are with us today, and we're going to ask them some questions about their experiences implementing and designing school improvement plans. And then once we kind of get their insight about that, we're going to open it up to all the attendees to ask them or us any questions about what we learned today. My name is Dr. Gonzalez. I'm an associate professor in the Educational Policy Leadership Program here at UNLV. I'm also a former school administrator. I am thrilled to be with everybody here today. I also have my colleague with me here, Dr. Roberts. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. My name is Maria Roberts. I am also an associate professor at UNLV. My experience is former school and district administrator.
Perfect. I'm also going to give some time to give our special guest administrators to introduce themselves. We'll go ahead and start with Lisa.
My name is Lisa Dalton. I am the assistant principal at Steve and Linda Cozine Elementary School in North Las Vegas.
Perfect.
Good evening. My name is Matt Jackson. I am currently the principal at Thurman White Academy of the Performing Arts.
Great. And last?
Hello, Abigail Johnson, principal at Fremont Professional Development Middle School and Academy of Medical Sciences.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Well, before we get started, let me talk to you a little bit about our Educational Policy Leadership Program here at UNLV. We have two different programs. We have a doctorate in educational leadership and a master's in educational policy and leadership. And I want to focus today on the master's program. This master's program, once you have completed, not only do you get a cool master's degree from UNLV, but you also are eligible for a Nevada administrative endorsement. In the state of Nevada, you are required to have this license or endorsement in order to become a school administrator. So once you graduate from the program, you are eligible to receive such endorsement. All of our coursework in the master's program is based off of the NEPF standards for administrators. You'll see that on our website and all of our course descriptions. You'll see all the standards that we hit for school administration. And some of the cool features about this program is that most of our students are teacher leaders, and they are aspiring to become principals or some type of school administrator. And so we give them experiences to shadow principals where they go and visit principals from other school sites beyond their own to see how it's like to become a school administrator. And also we coach and teach and prepare them to design and execute a school improvement plan. This is a really small mini school improvement plan on their campus, which we call a target group improvement plan. They select a specific demographic or group of people on their school campus in which they design some goals with other folks on their campus to attend to the needs or gaps on their data. So we've learned a lot about school improvement plans. In fact, we even did a study about school improvement plans and what that experience is like, especially for aspiring school leaders. And so we want to share with all of you today some of the research we've learned about school improvement plan. And like I mentioned before, the research we conducted about executing and designing such plans. So I'm going to give the time over now to Dr. Roberts to talk a little bit about what I just mentioned.
Okay. What I will do is I will explain to you what a school improvement plan is and its importance. First of all, every campus, and this is through most of the United States, you have to have a school improvement plan to show that you have looked at your data and that based on that data, you have come up with a plan on how to improve performance on your campus, because every campus gets some kind of rating based on student performance and other measures. So anyway, that school improvement plan is actually something that is available to the public, and it should be in every office, every school office, so that people can see how the goals were arrived at. The data that is used is all about students, but it's also has to do with everything about the school, depending on what it is that you're trying to improve. But the number one improvement area is always student achievement. So that's what is looked at. You also have to include the school goals based on that data, and it has to be visible to everybody on that campus, from the school janitor to the clerks who work in the office. Everybody on that campus is supposed to know what the goals are and what the strategies are. It says all staff are involved in developing the plan. So the principal gets everybody on the campus to look at the data, and then everybody has to agree what the data says, and then they have to agree on which area they're going to improve, or if it's one area, two areas, whatever, they have to agree what they're going to improve on, and then how they are going to arrive at it. Because then throughout the year, they have to collect data to see if what they are going to implement is actually working. And that's about it for the school improvement plan. Now, our particular study, what we did is we looked at the school improvement plan reflections of 53 of our students. And that was actually, I believe, 3 cohorts. And what we did is we looked at their reflections to try to determine if there were any patterns in what they said that they had learned. And it's important, before you see the findings, it's important for you to know that being a principal is not an easy role. You have to learn many things. You have to learn things, how to do specific things, what we call skills. And in this case, they're called technical skills. You have to know how to work with people. And that's really important, because if you don't know how to work with your teachers and how to get them to work toward goals, then it's going to be very hard to improve your school performance. Then the other thing that principals have to do is that they also have to be really good at helping the school develop a vision. Because it's something very abstract, and principals have to know how to develop those concepts. So I'll very quickly explain to you what after we looked at those items that the students said that they had learned, then we looked to see what kind of theory it was grounded in. And in our particular case, the patterns that showed up were that the students learned technical, human, and conceptual skills. And when you go back and look at literature, you realize that those are the skills that were first introduced by Katz, who is a researcher. And he emphasized the fact that those particular 3 areas have to be, the administrator has to be good at them in order to be able to be good at school improvement. So technical skills are the things the how-to things. And usually when you do that, it's at the beginning of when you first start being a leader at your campus. One of the things that you do is you don't go in as a principal. You go in as an assistant principal, because you have to learn a lot of skills. You have to know how to actually do the work. And then the next item are the human skills. And when you're talking about the human skills, again, that means you've moved up to a slightly higher level, because now you're dealing with people. You're the middle manager. So you've been a principal, but you're starting to, the principal is starting to give you more and more things to do that deal with people and getting them to do things. And finally, when you're ready to become the principal, then that's when you really have to use your conceptual skills. This is where you have to get everybody on board to come up with a plan, to come up with ways to help the school, and then implement them, and then check your data. So, and that's something hard to do because teachers are used to the principal telling them what to do. But when you're the principal, you have to teach them how to do things also. So you have to develop these conceptual skills. The big concepts and abstract concepts, you have to bring them down to the level of the teacher to help. Okay,
Perfect.
next slide.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Roberts. So given that we were using the CATS three-skilled approach to kind of help us codify and analyze all these reflections of our aspiring school administrators' experiences, designing and executing these school improvement plans, this is what we found. Here are some themes that we found. So the first theme was that, hey, it's kind of challenging to figure out how to trust and delegate tasks to team members. All right, how do I entrust and delegate tasks? I have certain goals, certain objectives, and I can't do everything. I shouldn't do everything. So I got to figure out how to delegate some of these responsibilities, these tasks to others. So it seemed kind of like a challenge for some of our aspiring school leaders. The other theme was just like Dr. Roberts talked about and was really prevalent in the theory, CAT's three-skill approach, was establishing relationships. Boy, was that huge, right? You're in a team, you're trying to figure out goals, you're trying to build relationships, and building those relationships also help with the motivational process, right? So if I need to motivate people, my relationship will play a factor on how I'm going to motivate the teachers or my team to execute these goals. And lastly, there's so much data at my school, and I'm focusing on different parts and different data points. I had to really learn, this is what the students were telling us, I had to really understand and learn how to make decisions based off of data and not off of feelings, right? And so I have to look deeply into what's available and sift and disaggregate information and data at our school to really make an effective and clear decision for executing these school improvement plans. And so what did we learn? Yes, definitely technical skills is a must, right? Like candidates really enhanced their technical skills because they were trying to understand how to use the data from their school. Big plus there in our program and for our students. Like Dr. Roberts talked about, the conceptual piece, setting goals, looking at the bigger picture. That vision part was also huge because I may have a goal, but the other team members may not see that goal or that vision. Right. So having that shared vision was essential. And then again, human skills, that relationship piece was such an important part of the overall success of these school improvement plans. So that's our study, and that's what we've learned about designing and executing school improvement plans. What we'd love to do right now is, given that we have done this study and we teach this stuff at UNLV in our Educational Policy and Leadership Program, we now have some questions for our special guest administrators regarding school improvement plans. So I'm going to ask the first question here to our guests. Our first question for our administrators is, when it comes to improvement plans, how do you decide which responsibilities to hand off to teachers? And I'll open it up now.
When I'm looking at my plan, generally there are three components. There's the adult learning, there's the academic achievement, and then there's the focus on students. I look at what particular goals and strands and standards I'm trying to focus on. And when I've created that plan, I have my school improvement team work with me to determine what pieces would be administration and what pieces would be teacher-led. We have conversations about who could take on different aspects of those particular goals, and then we create a plan in terms of deciding those responsibilities. A lot of times it has to do with what is something that's going to be more handled in the classroom, or what is it something that requires a little more administrative oversight. And so I kind of look at those two pieces as ways for this to begin those conversations, even if it's something like a staff development day and a presentation to the staff. We can tap teacher leaders, especially if it's something that I feel we've trained them at this point and they have the ability to train others.
Right.
I think that it's important, um, when you're developing the plan, as Matt said, you involve, the team and the team's input of your teacher leaders. I don't feel like it's always a collaborative process. So when you talk about our high level school performance plans that were required as part of the continuous improvement process with the state of Nevada and the district, um, those are guiding documents, but they don't necessarily drill it down to what needs to happen on the day to day. So a good framing that I've come into in the past few years, this is my 4th year as a principal, 12th year in administration though, is that if you have that broad plan that you create, align with the required components, the statewide components on the plan, and then you bring it down in the meetings, and you really backward plan is what I was getting at, is that say, okay, this is our ultimate goal. We know we want to get here. And I can't say, okay, I'm going to do a bunch of stuff and then hopefully we'll meet the goal, right? We can't do it's about checking your progress along the way and making course corrections as needed. That's so critical because I always tell our teachers, our staff, and our students, you don't have time, we don't have time. I just get you for this much time, a day for 3 years, whatever you want to think of it, and I want to launch you here ready to fly into high school and post-secondary education. So really it's about using that broad plan and then backward planning and then saying, okay, what is necessary, like what training is necessary, what professional development, what support, and how are we going to support it with our walkthroughs and our other structures school wide to really make sure it's going. So for me, it's about making sure teachers are prepared and then protecting their time with the kids in the classroom, because it's the most important stuff that happens at a school, is that interaction between the teachers and the students. So.
And for us, using like that team focus, it takes everybody to do it. The big idea, break it down into small chunks, and try to think of our people as resources instead of just like time as a resource or a program or as a resource or a tangible thing. Our people are the resources. So who is the best resource to help us achieve that goal? The small goals to lead to the big goal.
Right. Because every teacher's got their own talent and genius to give to the school, right? And so it's almost like you're trying to tap into their expertise to help move the school forward, right? And it's your job as the principal to kind of figure that out, who's got that gift, so to speak, right, on the school campus to help you successfully execute this school improvement plan. So in the study, we talked about relationships. That was also part of the theory as well. This question obviously relates to that. So how do you approach relationship building with your teachers to make sure everyone feels invested and empowered in the improvement process?
For me, I've always thought of relationship building as you're trying to ensure that trust. You're trying to build that community within what's going on your campuses. And I think it starts with just how you approach the day to day. How do you engage with each of your staff members, with each of your students? Are you visible? Are you out there? Are you connecting? Are you welcoming? Do you make those connections with teachers about, hey, how was your weekend? What's going on? Welcome back. Trying to keep those positive pieces. But in terms of continuing that relationship building, I also think to invest and empower. One of the things that I do on my campus is I really do believe in a communicative and collaborative style of leadership. So I invite input from my teachers to share on any kind of topics that we're wanting to do, processes, any kind of regulations, so that they have a way to feel and voice what they would like to share. And we can talk as a community to what's going to be best to develop further plans on the campus. And that's sort of how I do it. I even created this year an advocacy committee, which the whole purpose is to review the processes on our campus, what could be improved, because the one thing I don't believe in is there's no ultimate answer. I think we all work collaboratively to find the best solution for what meet the needs and needs of our campuses.
Now, Matthew, not to deviate a little bit, but you mentioned something about being visible and how that helps relationships. Kind of speak to that with our audience? Maybe some people are aspiring to be school leaders. What does that mean exactly, being visible?
Well, if you were to ask my teachers on campus, it would definitely be that you're out and about in the hallways. They can see that you're in what's going on. You're not just hole up in your office. They see that you're engaging in your different classrooms and you're going and seeing what's going on. One of the things I do is we have morning news, and I go to one classroom a week and showcase the kids and the students and the teachers and what's going on in those rooms. But just being out there, that they can see that you are not just trying to stay in your office, that you're engaging with them, and you're, so I guess visible for me would be a connectivity and being out and about.
Perfect. Thank you. Anybody else?
We unmuted at the same time. In addition to, I had the idea of visibility, also that open door, but one of the things when problems or conundrums are presented to us, we try to solve it as a team, not just say that, the admin office is going to solve it. We try to solve it as a team and take everybody's input. And then when a decision is made, we kind of preface it with like, we heard what you said, but this was a suggestion that was made, and this is how we think it will help the big picture. Because sometimes, teachers have a hard time just focusing on their bubble because that's what they know. And then when you're an administrator, you have to always refer back to the big picture. And so using our team to solve the problems for the big picture is huge here. The other thing that we believe in at Cosign is starting with yes. So if you have something that you want to try, you notice something and it only affects you, like we want to support you to make it happen within reason.
Oh, I like that. Starting with yes.
I'm going to write that down. It's kind of not played out, but a lot of it, you have to start with a why. People have to understand it's not happening to them, that they are active part, actually a really critical component. Like, I cannot do this on my own. I have these ideas. I make decisions based in research and best practice and what works. And you have to really consider, your staff. There's different experience levels. So tapping on those who've brought, have some wisdom from years of experience, and also, the exuberance and excitement of young teachers and willingness to, go get it and try new things. That can be a really powerful combination that we found. And we've had some really great results by kind of honoring both of those components. But again, you have to hold everybody on your campus to a very high expectation, because our kids deserve that. The kids need to be high expectation, the staff, everybody, myself. But it can feel really, really, if you have high expectations, you have to provide the necessary support and PD and like you said, empowering them to know how to be successful, in meeting these improvement goals. And then they tend to invest, but there's got to be little wins. So, I also try to be very visible, interact with kids, because that's why we're here. They make me happy, going into classrooms, not even, just as a short walkthrough and leaving a Post-it note to say, hey, thank you for incorporating this, or hey, look at your learning success, learning intentions and success criteria, or right on, and you were interacting with them and your kids knew exactly where they were going with this. So, highlighting what you see them doing that are in line with maybe that larger plan, or even those little individual baby plans that you're pushing through PLCs or our PDs. We have common preps. So sometimes we do professional development, in little mini PDs on prep days, where they can come and, learn. We have a year-long PD and PLC plan that remains at least for 2 months out, right? Because you can't go too far. You have the overarching of the plan aligned with all the other plans and structures we have to do, but it has to be responsive. It has to be living, like a living plan that says, okay, wait, that didn't go so well. We're doing a school-wide writing process with our SLG, and teachers are struggling putting it into this program we're using called Think Circa. That needs to be recognized and addressed. It can't just be like, bulldoze, do your best, figure it out. That's not the way to do it if we really want to have the buy-in and the support. And then the outcomes with our students and their growth. So.
Well, Dr. Johnson, you mentioned a living plan. I love that comment there. And one of the big reasons why I think you would call it a living plan is because of data at the school. All right. The data keeps kind of increases, decreases, changes. And that was part of our study, right? And that was part of the theory as well, is understanding data. It could be overwhelming sometimes, right? You have so much work, so much data that you're looking at. And so that goes along with this next question for all of you. What are some of the biggest challenges you face in turning that data into real practical action steps? It's a tough question. So we just talked challenges, right? The
This is
challenge.
our bread and butter. Part of it is, so if you try to look at all the data, then really you're going to consider none of the data, and it's just too much. So you have to decide, you have to look at your plan, and you have to look at what your goals are, and then you have to dial in on data. Now, you can always say there's more, and there's this, and align this, but you have to focus in. And that was a big challenge for me over the past few years, because I want everybody to have everything they need all the time, and that's how I want it, but there are limited resources, and so we have to be strategic, whether it's grouping students based on the data says they have this need, and so instead of trying to individually teach these kids, I'm going to bring them together. We're going to, there's a lot of examples you could come up with, but you have to be strategic in how you approach it based on what outcomes you're looking for, and then you consider that data. And then you have ways of, again, revisiting that data. I met with RPDP today to make the plan, and she had a rotating structure where every 3 weeks with our math teachers, we're going to try it. They're going to implement, decide on what intervention, like basically tier 2 structures in their classroom for small groups, or, other resources, digital resources, IXL, other programs that are available to differentiate. They're going to choose one, because it's like, if we say we have all of these and we don't, it can be overwhelming, and then none of them get work. So choosing one, and they're going to be on a 3-week cycle of implementing, and we're going to have a way of checking, is it working? And if not, then we're going to move to the next, or we'll add another, we'll improve from there. But data can help guide you to what, you're going to have your really high impact action steps from, and then also allow you to see if it's working, because sometimes things work in one place and don't work in another. So you have to keep your finger on the pulse.
So I think one of the biggest challenges that, to Dr. Johnson's point, beyond the overwhelmingness of the data, is actually understanding how to analyze the data. I think one of the challenges that we have is that sometimes we look at it and we don't necessarily know what we're looking at. So I think part of that is a professional learning and a growth that you need to, not only for administrators, but for the staff members as well, to understand and be able to look at, if we're going to talk about this particular goal and this particular piece of data, what is it we're actually looking at? How do we know that this is a problem or a concern? How do we be able to determine what are going to be, because you can't create actionable steps if you don't understand what you're looking at. So you have to take some time to do some professional learning just in the process of analysis. I know that for myself, I've had to go to several data analysis trainings just to make sure I know what my Nevada report card is telling me. So when you look at those and you start to want to pare down to some of your important pieces, you need to have some time to understand what the tools are, what is the assessment asking, and why is that information important to you.
That was great.
In addition to the types of the data and the reliability of the data, at least at the elementary level, we kind of struggle with being assets focused. So like when we're looking at data, everybody wants to know what the kids can't do instead of what they can do to build on that and move it forward. And I think part of that too is because there's so much data that teachers are looking at that they don't, what is the one that's going to get them the most bang for their buck? And then another thought that I have in our building is that not everyone knows the data and where we're going. so that not everybody from the janitor to the office staff to the SPTAs, not everybody knows that data and where we're going. Everybody has a lot to do, and sometimes it's, do I have to do this? Like, does this pertain to me? But yes, because the whole school is full of our students.
Wow, that was great. That was great. Yeah, we can see that it's very challenging, and it seems like every year brings kind of a different level, right, of data analysis to the school, because our demographics are constantly changing, and I could see how this can be an ongoing challenge. And like all of you mentioned, the importance of developing this skill, right? Extremely important to develop it and then refine it as you go further and further into your career. Talking about careers, October is actually National Principals Month. And so we would love to hear from you about any advice you would give to students in our program or people who are watching this web series about pursuing a career as a principal.
So I might be going off a little bit on a tangent here, but I'm going to say, if I'm going to give you one piece of advice, is give yourself grace. It's okay. You're not going to know everything. You're not going to have every answer. And working collaboratively and being able to build community, not only and network with not only your supervisor but other colleagues, other principals. Be okay with not having every answer, and be okay with needing to seek out other advice.
That's great.
I find that to be the most empowering thing once you accept, or once you are on, like, I don't know everything, but I know how to look into it. I know how to study it. I know how to bring in experts. That's what I do. Like, I understand, I have certain skills I know that I have, and as a leader of my school, but I do not know everything to the most, and people see right through that if you try to pretend as if you do, because the person you're talking to, that teacher, might have more expertise in that than you do. It's very possible. So it's always it's always an art of learning and knowing the right questions to ask, but also knowing who you can bring onto your team to make everything, bring that clarity to the teaching staff and to your PLCs and the ongoing, going and doing coaching cycles with teachers, really coming from a place of support. My other piece of advice would be, you have to always remember that as you move through into administration, then say, you move up, that you still look in the mirror and you see yourself, and you know where you're coming from, and you know your background and all of those things. But others, when you come, they see your title first, and you're like, well, I'm just the AP, I'm just the principal. But that weighs on how people hear your words and your actions, and interpret your choices. And sometimes you just have to acknowledge that and realize that you never want to be the administrator who goes in the classroom and goes, I don't know what everybody's problem is. Everything's fine around here, because you change behavior, right? And so sometimes you just have to recognize that and accept it and use it, and break that down by being visible and being accessible and having an open door and asking questions and asking for input, and constantly be okay saying, I don't know, actually, or that didn't go well. I'm trying it. I'm having to do it right now with this school-wide writing. Everybody's like, how do we do this rubric? And what is this? And how does this apply to math? And you know what we say? All right, we're going to do a P. We're going to come together and we're going to figure it out, because we're doing something that hasn't been done before. So you have to be brave, and take risks, but also, be humble. So that's my advice. I'm going to mute now.
And she's right. One of the most important things that I was told as an administrative student going through the EPL program was everybody's watching every move and listening to everything that comes out of your mouth. So you have to be aware that you have a constant audience, and make sure you're true to who you are. Support your teachers, But another piece of advice that I would have is make sure you have good time management and you prioritize, especially prioritizing creating systems that allow you to be proactive instead of reactive, especially as a brand new administrator.
Great. Well, that was great. Thank you so much for your advice. And being a school administrator, as a former school administrator myself as well, I know it's extremely challenging, but at the same time, it's extremely rewarding. And so it's kind of ironic, right? Like you have those two dichotomies at the same time, just super challenging, super rewarding, and highly encourage, right, people to jump into school administration. Well, what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I want to now give whoever's out there in the audience some time to ask us about what we've discussed today. And so feel free to use the Q&A icon on Zoom, or you can simply use the chat icon as well if you have any questions or comments for us. All right, so one question. How do you stay encouraged during times of economic hardship or threats to defund education? So maybe we will answer that live. So any comments about that? And I'll repeat the question one more time. How do you stay encouraged during times of economic hardship or threats to defund education?
I continue to keep our children at the center of every decision and do the best, very best that I can to give them every opportunity and experience and be inspired and engaged, all the things. It can be challenging at times, but you just have to remember why you started in the first place. You can never forget. And the minute I do, they remind me right away as I go and make a joke and they, get it in the quad, or I love middle schoolers. They make me happy, especially seventh graders. So you just have to keep in mind the kids and stay in communication with the community. Like if there are challenges you're facing, you have to be transparent and upfront. And fiscally responsible. You try to make the best choices, but I'm also very big that the money that is given to us for funding is for the children that are sitting in my building right now. And so I spend money on field trips. I send them on experience. I bring people here. I hosted a summer camp with a UNLV astrophysicist. I do what I can for the kids that are here and make the best choices I can. So.
We have another question here. How do we keep our faculty and staff culturally competent to our student body?
I think one of the things that I try to do in terms of keeping that focus is that having those conversations and reminding the staff about this is why we're here. We're about students and we're about the importance of our students. And we really have conversations, especially during staff development, about what special needs do all of our students need to be successful? What social and emotional learning sessions do we need to provide because they have those supports? What conversations about special education do we need to have because you're not familiar with the particular ins and outs of this particular child? And so I think it's about being passionate and caring and really knowing that we're going to spend time focusing on the needs of these individual students because that's how the culture is built. We want to build those relationships with students and we need to enforce and really promote that in every aspect. Greet your students at the door, have conversations, contact parents, build that community. That's how you're going to keep that culture and you're going to know who your students are.
Right.
Oh, I just want to say that you have to say the things. Last year, I saw our data come out and our Black students were really they did not respond to our instruction in the same way as the rest of the students in the school. That needed to be said. It's public data. Why, when they walk and they're receiving the same instruction in the classrooms, are they growing less and also, sometimes being disciplined more? They're, disproportionately represented in our discipline. So it was like, this is not okay. And then here's how we're going to address it. Here's what we're going to do. As a team, here's what we're going to do in our MTSS group, to structure the extra supports. Here's what we all need to do collectively for every child, but especially our kids who are not, somehow the instruction's not reaching them in the same way. You have to be brave. It's scary sometimes, but you have to be brave and say the thing. And our data, you can look at our report card for this year. I spoke before the board. I was very, very honored to have that opportunity a few weeks ago. But we no longer have a federal designation on our report card because our student groups grew so well, and there were the gaps, and our Black students outperformed every other group. Right? Like, we had triple digits, and a lot of it is because culturally, if you talk about culturally competent, right, and knowing different communities and that, like, a lot of it was just us saying, we see you. You are so capable. Do you understand? Like, you can do this off the charts. We had kids go from red to blue on map. No joke. I'm not joking, because they weren't. It was just like, whatever. Nobody cares. Nobody believes. Whatever. You can make generalities, but really, that's what it was. It was just like, we got this, and exceptionally, like, our chronic absenteeism across groups, everything really improved. But I don't know that I would have done that if I hadn't said the thing. Like, this inequity in Fremont will not be tolerated, and we're going to face it head on. That's it. Just,
That's great news, Dr. Johnson. I have
thanks.
two questions here. Many younger professionals have a mindset of moving around to move up in their careers. What advice do you have on this in the educational leadership space? That's the first question. Why don't we take a minute to answer that one, if anybody wants to jump on that one.
I don't want to hog the airspace here. I got a lot of stuff to say. Oh, okay. I think that there's something to be said for someone who commits themselves to a place and stays for a period of time where they are able to face and overcome challenges and then show results on the other end. Now, I know it's challenging because sometimes if you're pursuing promotions and such, but I'm never one to say not to follow your heart, but make sure that you're going to a place that's going to help you thrive and grow. And sometimes, as you're here, like, the grass is not always greener. Sometimes where you sit, even if it's uncomfortable, pushing through that will bring you to that place where you're supposed to be professionally. So I recommend, if you're going to be somewhere, you should commit to staying there for a period of time where you can show, this is what I worked through, this is what I did, because otherwise you don't know the population, you don't know the students, the community. How do you really know how to best serve them? So, but again, I understand the idea of moving through promotions. So I recommend pushing through and staying.
Well, I think you have to be really, really good at the job you've got before you move up, because you have to understand all of the facets of that job before you can be good at the next job.
Matthew, I know you have to leave here pretty soon. Any parting words, or if you want to answer this question? And
Well, Dr. Johnson, I'm just saying, I'll come work for you. Amazing. I just want to say to all of you, I wish you great success, and that do know that when it comes to career, you choose for yourself what you think is the right time and the right space. I took a very long time to get to the principalship. I spent 9 years before I even became a principal. But that was my personal choice because I felt there was so much more to learn. So you do what you feel is comfortable for you. What I do suggest, though, is don't be in a hurry. Take your time. Feel yourself out. It's there. It's waiting. It'll happen. Thank you so much to everyone. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Matthew. Have fun at the Haunted Bash.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Invite us to your competition, to your,
Oh, everybody's welcome. Come on.
okay.
We have another question here. What would you all do different, if anything, during your career progression to get to where you are today?
I mean, if to piggyback on Matt, it's kind of like uh, everything comes when it's meant to come. You do your best, you work your hardest where you're at, and then the opportunities will come, and you're preparing yourself. So any of those challenges or trials, when you start to feel like, oh, this is too hard, or just push through, because I think that, I too was an administrator for years before I became a principal. And I was very young. I didn't teach for very long. So I was always very much like let's do this, the next thing. And about, I don't know, 10 years ago, the dean was a position that you like survived and exited and moved on and did your AP and print all the other things, right? And for me, it was at a time when there wasn't a lot of movement. There was there was, mostly the promotions were coming from within the schools. So, there was, if you went to apply to another school, there was usually already another dean who had been there and kind of proven, was waiting to move up. And so that's what I encountered. I went to a lot of interviews, and it was very humbling, because it was, before that, it was like, oh, I think I'm going to do this. Oh, yes, you got it. Oh, I think I'm going to do this, and it didn't work out like that for me. And I always think back to this as a kind of a turning point in my administrative career, in terms of saying, like, I could have gotten really bitter and like mad about what being a dean, and this is, the low, I'm doing all the discipline and maybe transportation and, these things, and, supervising electives, and because it was like really the entry level. But instead of taking that route, I did decide that this is where I'm supposed to be right now. I'm going to keep trying to move to where I think I should be, but obviously this is where I am. And I would not be the same administrator today that I am had I only been a dean for a year or two and moved into assistant principal, because it's where I started to see some of the, what I believe to be, disparities in the application of discipline. I'd seen it before that as a teacher, but you're in this bubble. Like, I saw who was given 2 chances and who was given 10, and whose parents were called and who was sent out of the room to the office without even attempting, right? Because they're not going to support me anyway. Like, those mentalities I saw. And then I was introduced to PBIS and learned about and brought that on as a dean. Luckily, I had a great principal who gave me opportunities. Once I had mastered a lot of those, I was a seasoned dean, I was able to do other things that were more about the culture and the climate. Because, I can now say with confidence in my principal meetings last week, when it was brought up that they want to do practices to address, restorative practices in the student success office, the dean's office, whatever you want to call it now, the discipline office. And I raised my hand and I said, if you wait until it's in the discipline office, you waited too long. It's too late. You got to bring it back to engagement in the classroom, academic expectations, support, intervention. Like, all of the things have to happen in the classroom, because that's where we have to keep our kids. It's not about once they're sent out, sending them back. Like, then no, they've already been sent out. They've already been excluded to a level. So all these things that I understand, and now that I try to amplify at my own school and now other schools as well, as I share the practices, and we have these amazing outcomes and results in terms of how our kids are remaining in the class, learning academically where they need to be. I wouldn't have had any of that had I moved into the next too quickly. So just trust the process is all I'm saying, and stay positive and happy, and don't get bitter, because your opportunities will come.
Yeah.
And on my end, I don't know that I would do anything different, but I wish that I would have had a little bit of different experience, because I was in the classroom for 16 years before I decided to promote. And going from that bubble and going to the big picture so quickly was a shock. Like, it was a huge learning curve, constantly looking globally, even though you're prepared for that in your master's, you prepare for that in your master's program, but having 35 fifth graders versus 700 pre-K through 5th graders was a huge shock. So I wish that I would have had more global experience, maybe as a strategist or something, just so that I know what that coaching looks like with 100 teachers and 700 kids versus a small classroom.
Right. Well, I think we have time for maybe one more question if there are any. Feel free to raise your hand or use the chat box or the Q&A box. Okay. Looks like we are good to go. I just want to thank our guest administrators, Dr. Johnson, Lisa Dalton, and Matthew Jackson, who had to go to his school event here. I want to thank Youngbok Kim also, who helped organize the tech side of all this. Thank you so much, Youngbok, and everybody who attended. Any last words, Dr. Roberts, you want to add before we end?
I'd like to do the same thing. I'd like to celebrate our 3 excellent principals who we're very proud of. And I really loved hearing what I heard, remembering that children are why we are in the profession. And thank you so much for giving our students your perspective, because it means a lot for them to know what to expect. And thank you, Youngbok, because you're our savior here. As far as technology, we count on you so badly.
Well, thank you, everybody. It's been a pleasure. And happy National Principals Month. Thank you for all you do. And have a wonderful day.